In this video, I'll be sharing with you the latest and frankly shocking details of how FTX lost 10 billion plus in crypto, including billions of dollars of user funds. And furthermore, we'll discuss what comes next in this whole saga. Now, the acting CEO of FTX, John J. Ray III, who just so happens to be the guy who presided over the eerily similar disaster scenario at Enron earlier this century, submitted a 7-page bombshell to the U.S. House of Financial Services Committee ahead of his testimony on site. And this document outlines the details of just how irresponsible and downright criminally mismanaged FTX actually was leading up to its demise. Now, I have the document here, and I want to read you the most horrific parts right up front, the ones that give a clear picture of just how $10 billion or more evaporated from FTX's books. And yes, I do have a printer, and I print documents out on occasions such as this. This is crazy. Okay, so in this document, Ray immediately makes clear what we already knew, and I quote, FTX Group's collapse appears to stem from the absolute concentration of control in the hands of a very small group of grossly inexperienced and unsophisticated individuals who failed to implement virtually any of the systems or controls that are necessary for a company that is entrusted with other people's money or assets. End quote. Sam Bankman-Fried and his band of buffoons operated a multi-billion-dollar institution like a flash-in-the-pan crypto startup. Based on what John J. Ray III says in this document, I've seen Dungeons and Dragons clubs built with more organizational structure and risk management policies in place than what FTX appeared to have. Here's the list of, quote, unacceptable management practices identified at FTX during this month-long investigation so far. First of all, the technical failures were egregious, with compute infrastructure that held customer assets accessible to senior management without security controls, private keys for millions of dollars worth of crypto assets that are held without security controls or encryption to protect them. Both of those things alone are grossly negligent, I might add, and that is an understatement. The operational and ethical failures were, unfortunately, worse than that. As was widely speculated, Ray III in this document confirmed unequivocally that Alameda Research, the trading arm affiliated with FTX, had an unlimited amount of access to lending from FTX for trading, and assets between the companies and other business units were haphazardly commingled between functional areas of the business, making proper accounting impossible. Furthermore, there was a complete and total failure to produce trustworthy reporting on the hundreds of investments made by FTX Group, nor standard financial statements you'd normally see. Finally, there was unsurprisingly a lack of proper independent governance as well as financial and risk management functions. That's crazy. And by the way, if you want to keep getting the hype-free info on this story and other hot stories in crypto, make sure to hit the like button and get subscribed to the channel so you get a heads up when I post new content, especially about this unfolding FTX story. That said, these, 8 bullet points worth of revelations or confirmations of what we already believe to be true in some cases are a complete and total damnation of all those who are complicit in the negligent and fraudulent actions of FTX. These details are undoubtedly part of, if not all of, what law enforcement needed to move forward with enforcement action against the tip of the spear, Sam Bankman-Fried. Bankman-Fried is, as of Monday night, reportedly in custody, having been arrested by Bahamian law enforcement after the United States Attorney for the Southern District of New York shared a sealed indictment with the Bahamian government, which prompted that action to arrest Sam Bankman-Fried. The charges allegedly brought against Sam are related to wire fraud, securities fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy related to the aforementioned fraud. And we'll know a lot more about the specifics of these charges in the coming days, if not by the time you watch this video, as I'm recording this basically in the middle of the night. Now, I can't emphasize how shocking the realities of the FTX collapse really are at the end of the day. I mean, we knew this organization was run poorly. I mean, it collapsed, so clearly it was. We knew risk management took a backseat. That's obvious. We had a feeling Alameda had unlimited borrowing ability and blew a ton of capital in a bull market. But the complete absence of technical, financial, and risk management processes in place blew me away completely. I did not imagine it was going to be this bad. As a tech-focused person, having private keys on what seems to be an uncontrolled, unsecured system and user funds accessible to senior leadership with no governance is enough for me to say without a doubt there's no way Sam Bankman-Fried's the only person arrested in this saga. It is horrendous. Of course, it's also something that goes without saying that Alameda being allowed to quite literally gamble with FTX funds, including user funds, is fraudulent to the nth degree. At every single turn and every single layer of the business, if you can even call it a business with the total lack of organization here, there was systemic failure. And you know what? It has to be said. Where were the regulators here? Genuinely, there was this much broken at this organization, this much chaos, this little risk management, this little financial reporting, and no one in a regulatory capacity had any inkling that something was wrong. It really is confounding. And I'm not pointing to a conspiracy. I'm genuinely asking, how is this missed? So stick with me, because I'm going to give you my view on what comes next here. But there's little detail of FTX US to talk about first, which we also got clarification on in this document, which I thought was pretty interesting, and again, something we had assumed might be true. Ironically, it was thought that the US arm of FTX, FTX US, was the only regulated entity in the pack, and it was going to avoid the fate of its global parent company, because it had to have been run correctly. But that was not the case. This document made that clear, and I quote, FTX US was not operated independently of FTX.com. Chapter 11 protection was necessary both to avoid a run on the bank at FTX US and to allow our team the time to identify and protect its assets. So clearly, something is broken beyond repair, not only in FTX, but in how these opaque centralized entities can fly by night and avoid accountability till the last moments. It's almost like we need a transparent public domain to facilitate every financial institution's actions and stop enabling closed-door finance. I wonder if technology like that exists somewhere. Now, we know a lot of things for sure now. We know that Alameda was able to borrow client funds to trade and lose in trading big time. And those assets were commingled between FTX and Alameda on accounting or lack thereof. FTX also blew an inordinate sum of money, billions in fact, on investments that have come to basically nothing. We also know that FTX made loans and payments to insiders totaling over $1 billion. All of this is no longer speculation. It's right here in the document. A document produced in 1 month of investigation, but this is only the start, my friends. Just imagine what we will find out as this long, painful process of unwinding another failure of centralized greed unfolds. So what brings me now to this topic of what happens next. Let's talk about it. John J. Ray III said it pretty clearly in this document. What comes next is a detailed investigation that will help determine what exactly happened, to trace assets, and determine a final plan for restructuring or sale of what's left of FTX. This investigation will likely take months, if not years, and likely years. I quote, "The scope of this investigation underway is enormous. It involves detailed tracing of money flows and asset transfers from the time of FTX's founding and highly complex technological efforts to identify and trace crypto assets. We're in the process of collecting and reviewing dozens of terabytes of documents and data, including records of billions of individual transactions, and we are leveraging sophisticated technology and expertise to identify and trace additional transactions and assets." Now, in that, I noticed a very subtle message that they're using new technology, it seems, to trace this. But I also noticed a respectable message in all this afterwards that I think can be found on the last page of the document. So Ray III refers to those who deserve answers, listing customers, creditors, investors, counterparties, employees, and regulators. Now, what group comes first in that message that he says deserve answers? Customers. And this may be unintentional, but it reads intentionally, and I'm going to assume it was intentional. The customer should come first in every way here. The customer deserves answers and reparations to the greatest degree possible. Regulators and those working this bankruptcy case should accept nothing less than putting the retail customer first, at the front of the list. So I like that the customer was named first. The reality of this situation is that we've only scratched the surface as to the details of what happened behind the scenes at FTX. and we have likely only seen the very beginning of criminal charges and enforcement action that will be taken against those who presided over this calamity. There's no conspiracy here, folks. This is a straight up fraud. It will take a long time to unravel. I mean, look at how long it took to unravel Mt. Gox. It's still more or less ongoing, and that was 8 years ago that it halted operations. This is infinitely more complex and devastating than Mt. Gox as well. To those who've been directly affected by this, I know that this confirmation of the sheer magnitude of the crimes committed will give you no solace, although seeing Sam Bankman-Fried in custody might, but it's incumbent upon us in this community to rally around one another to clean up the mess that's been made here and to cultivate the decentralized technology that makes this space so positively impactful despite the negativity. It's easier said than done to do in times like this, I know, but I'll be here, as will many others who are not here for money but for mission, as cliche as it sounds, a mission to build decentralized technologies for future generations to enjoy and hopefully to avoid calamitous examples of fraud and opacity like this. Now, on that sappy note, that's going to do it for me for this one, folks. I'm going to sleep. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week. I'll catch you this weekend for Crypto Over Coffee, but until then, cheers.